we pick up, and it's not too long before nonsense starts again. Rupee's children are running amok. Um, for whatever reason, I don't remember why, but they end up having to go to Ash's town that he grew up in, where we meet his father. And this is the best stuff of the series, and we'll start the conversation here.
So far, there's a whole subplot in season 3 that I think is better than this, but
Okay, so far that's fair. I love the stuff with Ash and his dad and I want to talk about this. I'm going to set this up, and then I'll throw it out for you guys to bat around. We as the audience watch Evil Dead, and we know that he was attacked by zombies, and we know that his friends were all turned into zombies, and he had to kill them, and that he was not a crazed murderer. Except that sounds like an insane story, and if you weren't there, you would assume he's just nuts. And what Ash vs. Evil Dead Season 2 deals with is the burden placed on those who love you when you do something insane. And it's fine that, again, we're with him. We know he was trying to save himself and everybody else at the time. But again, nobody else knew that. So everyone just assumes he's a murderer. And not only that he's a murderer, that he killed his sister. And so here we have this beleaguered father whose son has not only abandoned him, but apparently turned into an axe murderer. And his daughter's dead, and his wife left him. And he doesn't understand what he did wrong or why any of this happened, and he can't get his son to talk to him to explain what the fuck happened here.
And in fairness, he was the kind of father beforehand that led to someone like Ash. So he's not exactly the most...
He's not really in touch with his feelings. I get it.
I was going to say, anytime anyone meets, it was like, oh, you are so definitely Ash's father.
We'll talk
Majors, the casting of Lee Majors in that role is one of those bits of perfect, you couldn't have done that any better.
We'll talk about the two of them in the bar with the bull and Jillies, and they bust their face. It's a Cosby reference. Anyway, but I want to end my point with this.
There's enough ketamine in this season to warrant a Cosby reference.
But also how this affected the town, and how in turn the town's reaction to Ash affected his father. And for a goofy horror comedy that spends most of its time horror bukkaking the entire cast and the camera and passerbys and local wildlife, they did an excellent job of dealing with the kind of psychodynamic factors of what happens when one of us goes plumb crazy. How does that affect your loved ones and the town at large? And then in turn, how does that affect you? I mean, Ash left, didn't try to stick up for himself, which is a big point of contention in the show. Doesn't try to stick up for himself, just ups and leaves, thereby doubling down on the idea that he killed all of these people and made a run for it. So, who's got a burning desire here? Just kind of wants to jump in.
Can we at least acknowledge the humor of the whole, oh, it's a mechanical hand. I'm better, stronger, faster?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that was funny.
Good one.
Yeah.
Good one.
Yeah, I was glad, actually, that they brought attention to that one of the people that Ash killed was his sister, solely because many Evil Dead fans don't like to talk about the first movie. We talk about Evil Dead 2 and we talk Army of Darkness, but very few people acknowledge the first film because Evil Dead 2 was kind of a reboot, sort of a halfway sequel. I actually don't know what you'd call it. There's a term for it. I don't know what it is.
It's what happens when the rights to the first movie are in dispute and you make a sequel.
I think the new made-up stupid word is requel.
Yeah.
Requel.
That's about right.
It's a stupid word, but we can make it work.
Another example of a requel for people who are like, wait, what's a requel? So you had, El Mariachi, which was a low-budget movie about a mariachi who goes on a revenge tour, and he carries machine guns in his guitar case. And then Robert Rodriguez did so well with it, and the movie was so well received, he actually got a budget and basically remade El Mariachi as Desperado. It expanded on it, but it was essentially the same plot as El Mariachi. And then I don't know what the fuck he did with Once Upon a Time in Mexico, but I had
a lot of fun.
But I have to ask Jesse. Jesse, are you a Mexican or a Mexican?
Can't.
Best
I'm a
line
Mexican.
dialogue ever. All right.
William
Anyway.
Dafoe as a Mexican drug lord was a choice.
Anyway, back to Ash versus Evil Dead and the whole dynamic with the father and that whole plotline. Alexis, you were talking.
Well, like I said, it's because of that, I thought it was an interesting option that they were focused on that, because a lot of people, again, pretend that the first Evil Dead movie doesn't exist. So they only know that Ash killed Linda, his girlfriend. I hate to say it, I was actually getting confused because now we have the new interest named Linda, and I actually had to double back in my notes going, wait a minute, am I now getting they named both of them
She's
Linda.
so much better in this than she was in Picard. Like, I feel bad.
Yeah.
I feel bad because that actress, the actress who plays Linda, got tossed a lot of albatrosses for her part in Picard, and it's not her fault. They gave her garbage to work with in a shit show.
Seasons 1 and 2 of Picard are unwatchable, and it's nothing to do with the talent.
And I reviewed all 3 of them.
And it's nothing to do with the talent of the cast.
Right.
Nothing to do with the cast.
No, that was all writing. But my point is, like, she's a really good actress, and she does great in this show. It's like when you give her good stuff to work with, she's great. And I feel bad for how she got treated by fans because she was in a shit show like Picard. Back to you, Alexis.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but you do bring up a really good point. I mean, what Ash did, it's not just like he killed his all those other teenagers or college students. I don't know how old they were supposed to be in the first film. It's practically entered urban legend in Elk Grove. Mm-hmm. We have the ashy slashy children's rhyme that tips Ash off that something's going on in his hometown. We have when the kids steal the Delta, they actually so it's like you stole Ashy Slashy's car. Oh, that's just like a myth or whatever. It is entered to the point where it's just a legend in this town.
It's a Candyman or Freddy. It's like we're so many years removed from the original event. Now people just think it's bullshit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to kill my dog if he doesn't stop barking. I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah, I'm going to go to Jesse. Jesse, what did you think of the stuff between Lee Majors and Bruce Campbell and sort of that whole family dynamic and, dealing with, Ash's perfectly explainable behavior in the Evil Dead movies, but to the greater world.
I was going to say, like, how are you going to explain that to anybody?
Right.
And them take you seriously?
Well, you see, there's this evil book.
Let me explain.
Yeah.
And that's what is cool about this. One of the best parts of this season is as we get in the later episodes, that kind of pays off because he wants, he goes back and there's no way for him to try and tell somebody what happened and they expect them to believe him at all.
Right.
It is, Lee Majors as his dad, Brock Williams. Yeah. The apple does not. The apple does not fall far from the tree. And it's such good casting. And he just doesn't care. He even though Ash is back, it's like he hates him for what he supposedly had done. I mean, he killed his daughter for crying out loud, his own sister, But okay, well, you can go ahead and go on upstairs. We'll want you out of here later, because I got to get laid. It's like, okay.
I can sympathize.
I'm sure you could, sir. But so
when he throws Ash out of the house for that is not the same as you kicking your 8-year-old out of the house.
Joe, just go play in the yard.
But you mean the street? Yeah, whatever.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's cool to see him go back home, which I don't know if Elk Grove was ever part of the movies in any way. It was never mentioned as far as I know. So we kind of give our hero sort of an origin. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing that, Ash has always just been Ash Williams. We see how he evolves from when he goes to the cabin forward, and we don't really get a whole lot about his past. And there's even moments in this season where they're like going to explain something about his past. Brock says a couple things. He's like, I just want to let you know. And then we never find out, which I think is
You do in
okay.
season 3, but
All right.
Let me tell you
Okay.
how I had
Side note, no spoilers for season 3. I actually haven't watched it yet.
I will not mention specifics. I'm just saying that bit when he does I've got something to tell you. I have something shocking. It's going to.
That's what I was getting to. So I had a flashback to our first podcast where we talked about how heroes can never win, to the point where I had to cut that for the TikTok, because as soon as so like it's this really great moment. The whole episode. They're trying to bait a trap
That is the dumbest episode. But look, Ash loses his car, gets stolen.
Right.
And okay, how am I going to find my car? Well, if I throw a party, the drunken teenagers will show up, and they might show up. So let me get Ted Raimi, and we'll whip up fruit punch laced with more ketamine than you could possibly ever use. And I mean, Kelly takes a drink of this stuff and goes, "Well, there's so much sugar, it's making my teeth hurt." And there's the drugs.
There we go.
And it's like, I have my tug of them. Yeah.
So they have this. So it's really funny because they do this bit with the mechanical bull, where it's basically like a dick measuring contest between the father and son, as you do. And Bruce Campbell's like, I'm younger and I can handle this, and I'm the party guy, and this is easy, and you're an old man and you should get out of here. You're queer. You're the old man at
You're the old man at the cool young party, and you're ruining the vibe. And meanwhile, Kelly and Pablo just look at each other like, "Yep."
It's like, speaking of old. So he does the bit with the mechanical bull. He gets thrown off, and then Lee Majors shows him up, and goes home with a pretty blonde deadite, as we'll find out.
But goes to the bathroom.
Yeah. And so at the very end of the episode, the Deadites show up. We're killing zombies. This another hero moment for Bruce Campbell, and Lee Majors gets to see him do it, and he's like, "Oh my God, I've totally misjudged you. This whole town has." That's like a big thing with the season, because they do a lot of that with the sheriff. Like, oh my God, now it's suddenly very clear to me, and I'm sorry, son, that we've lost all this time together, and there's something very important I have to tell you. And he gets hit by the car.
Splat.
And I was just like,
twice.
I had three visceral reactions this entire season. That was one of them. Where I was like, Mama! I was like doing laundry at the time. I was like, motherfucker! I threw my pants in the air, not like normal, like this, and angry.
Freaking eyeball is stuck in the freaking grill of the Delta, because the Delta is turned into Christine's inbred cousin.
That's good, Alexis. Well done.
The fact that it runs over his dead body again at the start of the next episode when it's escaping is just...
Yes.
That's good shit. So I'll throw it over to you, Robert. Your thoughts on how they, and then we'll move on to the next plot point. How they handle the relationship between Bruce Campbell and Lee Majors and the town at large.
It's really good. Lee Majors was once again inspired casting for that, and his dynamic with Bruce Campbell is exactly what you need. Like, if you're going to introduce someone's parents, especially when they're as old as Ash is, it needs to make sense. Like, how do you get someone like Ash does not spring up out of nothing? No one does. Like, there's parenting here.
Mm-hmm.
So what kind of. So what kind of a father are you if your kid winds up like Ash? And then we meet Brock, and every bit of that clicks. So he's not only well written, it's very well realized by Lee Majors. And their dialogue is very quick. I mean, the fact it's been mentioned before, these are only 30-minute episodes.
I like how Brock kept going back to the same thing. He was like, why don't you take some responsibility for yourself? It's always somebody else's fault. You're always blaming things. Now you're telling me about zombies. For once in your life, why don't you grow up and be a man? And it's, what was it? The show was 2012 or something like that. I remember it was from a while ago from our first conversation. But, like, I can honestly see people struggling. Like, you and I have talked about how a lot of stuff that we know to be true growing up as men from born in the late 70s, early 80s, and a woman, but like there are certain ways of being, certain aspects of personality and development and morality that we know are universally true that people today struggle with and would argue with, and or would call it toxic or something. And so when Brock's like, why don't you take responsibility for yourself? There's a part of me that thinks the writers purposely wrote that, thinking people will take Brock as the bad guy in those moments. Like, he's being really even in context, he's being really unfair to Ash. And I'm listening to that, and I'm like, if you don't know that he really killed zombies, he's not wrong to say those things. And I think that's what makes the writing that much more sharp.
There's a really nice bit of so you and I have talked on occasion about the episode of The Simpsons where Frank Grimes shows up.
Right, yeah.
And fundamentally the question at hand there is, so what if this perfectly normal guy suddenly has to deal with the reality of Homer Simpson and just Springfield at large?
Right.
Because and
a world full of personality disordered people who don't take responsibility for themselves and blame everybody else for their problems.
Yeah, the line holds true. In any other country, you would have been locked up.
And with this one, they sort of just took the bit about, okay, we all know what's really going on here, but what does this look like from the outside? And let's play with that.
Yeah.
It's a good choice.
Mm-hmm.
So you have Ash and Brock constantly having bits of friction until they don't, at which point Brock dies.
And I'm screaming at Tom King.
But it still maintains with Ash and the whole town, and that kind of plays through most of the rest of the season.
I will say this. It's not that big of a town, and let me tell you, when zombies attack, word will spread. So the fact that we're still playing with it 3-4 episodes later, to the point where the sheriff,
hang on,
where it has to happen directly in front of the sheriff for him to buy it. Like, I will buy that only because the sheriff hates Ash so much, and Ash keeps making passes at his wife. And so it's like, I'll believe any story you tell me at this point because I hate you so much.
Hang on. You are somewhat misremembering the scene at the bar.
Okay.
Let me tell you what this looks like from the outside.
Here we go. I was about to say this.
So if you're at this party, right?
Yeah.
You see Brock and a 20-year-old girl go into the bathroom.
Right.
And at which point you go, okay, gross, but whatever.
Well,
Then Ash follows. And about 2 minutes later, Ash comes out covered in blood, wielding the girl's head. Nobody else saw her turn into a deadite.
Right, sure.
I just love that Ash didn't think to draw. He literally comes out like, "Oh, calm down! It's a zombie head." It's like,
yeah,
right.
It's like, Ash, perspective, dude, perspective.
So the point being, there, everyone else just sees, oh, it's Ashy Slashy. The legend is true.
Right.
So when everyone gangs up to try to lynch him, and they all try to storm the house.
Mm-hmm.
They're all still very clearly operate. The only other people who saw anything weird are the people locked in the jailhouse and the police station with Ash. So that's Ash, Pablo, Kelly, Ruby, the sheriff, and a couple of dead people.
Right.
There's nobody else out of there that comes out of that alive.
I hear you, and it's not worth arguing about. I feel like realistically, the word would have gotten out that there's a zombie outbreak well before.
Was that followed up with, or was that following after the word got out that a bunch of pink fuck was available at this bar? Because ketamine was at this bar, and I'm sure that they probably saw zombies last week too.
And yeah, and that's like, you're right that if that attack had happened in the bar, it would be utterly stupid. The fact that they do write enough of an out for the only people who saw her turn evil were Ash and Brock, and Ash killed her, and then Brock gets run over before he can advocate for his son in any sort of meaningful capacity.
Right.
And then we get the side plot with the evil car where the sheriff's daughter is kidnapped, more or less, by the car.
And the other boys are all dead.
And yeah, a bunch of other people wind up dead. So ultimately what you get, even before Ball shows up, and we'll get to Ball in a second, I assume.
Yeah.
Ash rolls into town after decades away. And suddenly
everyone's dying.
People start dropping dead violently.
I absolutely get it. I understand. That's why I'm not really fighting you on it. I'm going to throw this out there. at some point, at some point it felt like they were really trying hard to make the sheriff like hang on to he's a murderer because that's what they needed the sheriff to do. But on the other hand, Alexis and I were having a conversation before this podcast started about how people on a certain political side of the fence think that, you know, the government's going to take their house and won't give them aid and such because because a public figure said so. So I take back everything I just said. People are dumb. You're right, Robert.